Okay, the Switch 2, with the announcement with that reveal trailer, has now garnered over 100 million views across social media platforms on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and a lot of people are very interested in this device. But as I've gone through the trailer a couple of times and also some of the footage that Nintendo released on their website, there were a few things that stuck out to me here, and I also noticed some concerns online around a certain piece on the Switch 2 that could lead to it breaking, I guess, depending on how people treat it. And I figured we go over all of that here today and point out a couple things that maybe Nintendo didn't necessarily say in that trailer. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. Okay, let's start here with the front of the Switch 2. And the first interesting part about this is it's not actually solid black. It almost has this speckle sort of design. And it was kind of initially hard to see, but as we go through and you'll kind of pick out this design through some of the different shots we're going to look at, just keep that in mind, that it is slightly off from like just a matte black finish. Slight design in there with that like speckled white or light gray almost wrapping around it. Now the Joy-Cons also, you see they attach fully here. So there is no gap. And it's one of those things where when you have it pointed out to you, you'll always see it then. So like the Switch, little gap here, just for the Joy-Cons to be able to slide in, and they've eliminated that at this point. So the Switch 2 itself just looks like one solid piece, which I think is a very, very good design choice here. And you also have those little accents of like that coral red, almost that color, and then like the light blue, so that sticks out a bit. But I do like the change in that case. Here's a nice side-by-side just to get rid of that gap. It just, again, makes it look more premium, makes it look like it's one solid piece here. It's already been pointed out that the C button right here is blank, and so some were thinking that might be, oh, the C button isn't an actual thing. The rumors, the leaks, the images were off about that. No, I think what you're gonna see is Nintendo add that button in when we get to that April 2nd Direct, and they are able to describe and really go in depth as to what it's for, because as of now, it's just a blank square button. And if you look at the home button, you look at the capture button, they both have at least some sort of symbol or etching on it to signify the button. It'd be very weird if they just left this as a blank square. So no, you're going to see them probably fill the C button in here, probably some sort of animation that then leads into them describing, maybe it's a community function, for example, with voice chat. We did get shots of the top and the bottom. The top side is certainly more interesting. As you can see, we have these vents here, and these three here, much, much larger than what we have right now in the Switch OLED or the regular Switch. It seems like this system in particular is going to be not only pulling in more air, but also expelling, exhausting quite a bit of air. Most likely, as we assume, it's going to be a bit of a power jump, we'll say, from the current Switch, so it would make sense that it would need to be able to pull air through at a more rapid pace and more of it. Otherwise, though, you do have the USB-C port here for the top. Remember, we have two ports that we're dealing with now. And then on this side right here, people were wondering what this is. This is actually the light sensor. So what they've done, if you have the Switch OLED, look at the top of your system along there, you will see the same thing. And what they did was they removed it from the front of the Redbox Switch. If you look at that one, the light sensor is in the bezel. In this case, they moved it to the top so that they could shrink down the bezel specifically on the top and bottom of the screen. The side parts, there's still a bit of a bezel there, mostly because of the design and the way, for example, the Joy-Cons attach. They just need to have some extra space there for stability when it comes to that. But in this case, the top parts can actually be shrunken down with that bezel by just removing the light sensor here. And it's not a big deal. You don't usually put your finger over it and disrupt its ability to detect how much light is in the room. Otherwise, though, we have our headphone jack here. And interestingly enough, next to the game card, it looks like we have a microphone spot right there. It's this little cutout right here, and it's a better shot of it in this case right here, where you can sort of see it at the top right there. And at first I thought, okay, if we have a microphone there, that potentially could be the microphone that pretty much monitors the room, as what you get out of these systems is you have multiple microphones. Some are there for noise cancellation. Others are there to actually record your voice and hear you so you can talk to people, say, when you're playing a game. In this case, though, I haven't seen any other cutouts or anything. I mean, I guess it could be maybe hidden around the bezel on the front somewhere that I'm not seeing. But I think this might be the only real microphone input here, which isn't a huge deal. And in fact, if you look at right here, this is that leaked image of the motherboard. It's technically flipped around, so this would be the bottom, this is the top. And if you look over here, here's our headphone jack, game card slot right there. That's, if we could zoom in and look at it, that is a typical setup where you would have your microphone station here with some sort of like rubber grommet for vibration, that kind of thing. It reminds me very much of what's in the new 3DS XL. So I would actually look at this as microphone right here next to the game card slot, headphone jack. So all of that to me lines up. So yes, I do think a lot of the discussion and the rumors around there being a microphone in the system is correct. It does also look like the game card slot opens from the back here. Well, at least it lifts up from the back. It seems that this technically just steps up, so it doesn't flip up from here. It'll still be the situation where you put the card in looking at it from the front, which they kind of demonstrated in a way when they showed that it's backwards compatible. Your carts will still go in seemingly like this, and that flap will just sort of lift up. The good thing about this, though, is that little notch there seems it'd be a lot better than trying to just get a fingernail on the other side where the game card door and then the like sort of the top part with the screen, kind of just trying to rip it out of there. This just seems like it'll be a lot easier to access. We can see our nice side profile here, the kickstand out. It does appear that our micro SD would be somewhere around here, which was already kind of mentioned before, and it makes sense. That's basically what we have with the current Switch. It hides underneath the kickstand, whether it's on the OLED or on the older Redbox Switch. So again, micro SD Express is what we're expecting right now, but it's kind of hard to see. However, it does appear that we have like a cutout down here for it. Another good shot of the hinge here, which if you have the Switch OLED, they appear to be very, very similar, where they're high quality metal hinges for it. So you should have should be a similar tension and similar stability for it. And people are looking at this U cutout here for the kickstand, and I think that's mostly for material. That's really it. I mean, technically the legs are a bit longer compared to the OLED Switch from what we've gathered here. Just again, the system itself is larger, but I think the cutout for the U is mostly about the material. Think about how much more you would need in terms of like just cutting out a whole slab of the back that would sit here, and it's kind of unnecessary. Also, it would sort of help with cable run, I guess. If you need to run a cable under here for whatever reason, at least you can run it through the kickstand rather than just being one solid piece. Okay, now let's look at something that the internet is absolutely terrified of right now. This has been a bit of an ongoing debate, and that's the Joy-Con connectors inside of the Switch 2. We got a quick look at this, and pretty much because you see it looks like a cartridge connector, doesn't it? Some people were putting it next to a Super Nintendo cartridge when you look at the bottom of it. When I'm looking at this, it does look like a big chunk of plastic with some metal teeth here for contact points to the Joy-Cons that we know now would connect through magnets, and it would then insert into the Joy-Con for communication, charging, and people look at this and go, well, what happens if you put the Joy-Con in the wrong way? Well, it seems that if you look at it, the teeth are on this side and the black plastic here. The Joy-Con most likely can only go in one way. They've also worked to put the minus and the plus symbols inside to try to signify which Joy-Con goes where. Also, it's color-coded. There are a lot of things I'm sure Nintendo did here to at least point this out. But also, I feel like there is a little bit more to this connector than saying, oh, it's just this very, very solid, stiff connector here that can break easily, say, if you just throw the Joy-Con at it. I think there's potential for there being a little bit of give to this, and it's, unfortunately, looking at it, kind of difficult to really prove or showcase. But when I look at the motherboard shot that we had here before, I mean, this is the back of our Joy-Con connector here. It'd be right here, and there is spacing for this. So what I'm kind of envisioning is that connector does have some give to it. It's not going to retract all the way in. There doesn't just seem to be enough room here for that to even happen anyway. but I kind of feel like it will have some wiggle or give to it, similar to if you look at your dock right now, there is plastic inside of it around that USB-C that you can push down. It's supposed to be kind of spring-loaded. But even so, if you then kind of wiggle that USB-C around, there is a little bit of give to it. So it's kind of there for margin of error. So if you throw the Joy-Con at it, at this connector, I think it will be able to find that that connection a bit better than people are expecting. So I don't think it's going to be something that's going to break a ton. Will it break? Probably. There are many people who don't treat their systems well, and I mean, what are you going to do? But still, I don't think it's going to be as big of a fail point as people are expecting in this case. Oh, I also noticed that if we get a shot here of it, the Nintendo logo is indeed in here. Like, that was a big thing from the leaks. People were looking at it going, wait, there's a Nintendo logo inside. That's strange. No, there really is one in there. They also have the plus icon at the top here, again, to signify which Joy-Con goes where. I just thought that was funny that we did spot that here. And yeah, those images that got out there appear to be like 100% legit, just with AI backgrounds. You also can see our little speaker here. So we do have the speakers on the bottom, again, very similar to what we have with the Switch OLED. So Nintendo did take a lot away from that revision that they did for the Switch, mostly around the idea of putting a larger screen in place. Now, we believe we're dealing with an 8-inch display here. Remember, we went up to a 7-inch display with the OLED, and they had to do a lot to kind of move some of the parts around, and one of those had to do with the speakers. So, again, similar spot down here. The OLED speakers sound good, so I'm not really concerned at all about that. And then we also have our intake right here. There's another one on the other side. These are much larger, as I mentioned. So exhaust, intake, all of that is quite a bit larger for the new chipset. However, the most interesting part about what they've shown us so far, to me, are the Joy-Cons. And they were the most interesting part for a lot of people with the initial Switch reveal, because Nintendo hyped it up with the HD rumble, the form factor, all the things you can do with it. And I still have some questions around this. So there seems to be some debate around the idea of, is this an IR sensor? Because if it is, there's the same similar IR sensor on the other Joy-Con, which is kind of interesting because they only had it on the one Joy-Con side for the current Switch. To have it on both, I'm curious what their plans are there, but it's also possible this is just a piece of plastic that is running around the top, and it's just sort of how they have the mold set up. So we'll have to see when they do show off the functionality of this controller setup, if they do talk about the IR sensor. If there is not one, keep in mind that will play into what they've said about backwards compatibility not being across the board. Now, of course, people want to talk all about this sensor here, which we believe is for the mouse functionality. And Nintendo sort of alluded to this during the trailer, because they had these things flying all over the place on their side. It was like they were racing around, but I think most of us understood at that point, oh wait, this is like the mouse setup configuration that they're showcasing currently. Now, they also showed it with these wrist straps, which has the release lever here. And we'll go over how these Joy-Cons release from the side of the Switch, because I don't think it's as fancy as people were originally expecting or speculating on, but we have at least the release switch here for it. So I think these will go on and off a bit easier than the current Switch wrist strap, which, if you remember, people were getting those things stuck on backwards. That was a whole thing when the Switch first came out. I don't think you're going to see that as much with this. Now, it also appears that they're almost a cutout. Because when they zoom away from it, you can kind of see they have basically one large rectangular hole in it, and it just sort of wraps around. I think all this is doing is evening out the Joy-Cons themselves, because they want to make this still be the flat bottom part. And you can kind of see that the Joy-Con itself, the bottom, will touch the table, even though you still have this this larger piece going around it. That bottom part will be making contact. And if you look at the Joy-Cons, we have like these pads. You can see them here. And these are on the top and bottom, and it's pretty much just almost like a mouse pad that's going to run around the table a bit easier. So it will eliminate some of the friction by basically lifting it off of the table and giving a bit of a gap there to sort of move this around in that mouse mode. And in fact, if you look at ZR and R as an example, ZR is flared out much more than what we have right now with the Switch. So the back buttons there, the shoulder buttons, are actually not as protruded for the current Switch, and it makes sense why even R goes all the way around. Like it wraps further down the side of the Joy-Con than the current Switch does. So like if we look at this, you can see it comes all the way down to the side, which the normal Switch kind of ends right around here. And I think that extra little bit is so that it can act as a mouse click, basically. Like you can see it, you would have your finger up here, and this would pretty much be your right click, ZR. So it is interesting they showed both of them racing around. I can only assume that it's for a left or right-handed mouse, or who knows, maybe they have plans where you will be dual-wielding mice in a game, which I really can't count Nintendo out. They do come up with some weird ideas. Okay, so let's talk about how this Joy-Con is going to connect to the Switch to itself and how it's going to then detach. Now, you have SR and SL. There are rumors that these are actually metal. So these buttons are not plastic. And this is a very clever idea from Nintendo, if this is indeed correct. And I think it is, just based on the images we have now from Nintendo, as well as that leaked motherboard image. So these two buttons here being metal, when it does get thrown into the system, as Nintendo has done in their videos, right, where you see it kind of rolling up and then going to attach here, you have these buttons essentially connect or touch here and here, right? Well, then you go and you look at the motherboard, and we do indeed just have magnets. Like there's a magnet, and all those are going to do is make contact through the case to those buttons. That's it. That's how it's going to connect. And it's funny because you look at that and go, really, that's it? Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, really, that's sort of it. I mean, you also have the connector here that will be inserting in and then charging and again communicating with the Joy-Con. But for the most part, it seems like these very strong magnets along with that connector will be enough to connect. And again, I'm very curious myself to see this in action, see it in person, and see how sturdy it feels. But I think with the magnets, as well as this being a more, I guess, just a more aggressive concave here for where the Joy-Cons go in. Like, it's not a little bit of space here. When you look at the side of the Joy-Con, there's quite a bit of room that technically disappears into that before SL and SR even touch. But I think that'll be enough to make it so there's not a ton of wiggle between that. Now, how do you detach this? Because remember, there were some wondering if there'd be basically you press the button and it would electrically detach itself. No, it seems like it's going to be pretty basic. You see this little dot right here? Right there. This is going to essentially go towards the system. Like it's going to then push the Joy-Con away from it. So if we take a look at the system itself right now, take a look at the back, for example. You have your buttons here. All right. And what these will do is you'll press into it, and then that little spot, that little circle I was pointing at, will then go this way. So you'll push this way. It'll basically have a mechanism that then pushes that back out there. This will then start to detach, and then the whole thing comes free. Once I think you knock this magnet away at the top, I think the bottom one will free very easily. And that's one of the reasons that when they showed us the Joy-Con, if you remember, leaving the grip, they showed it leaving from the top starting and then the bottom. And I think that's very purposeful. I believe that's how it's going to detach. It's not as fancy maybe as people were making it out to be. It's going to be pretty straightforward. But the thing is, because the magnets will be, I think, fairly strong, I don't believe that's going to be an accidental thing, which is what people have some concern around now. Let's say you hold your Switch sideways while you're walking around. You accidentally press this button. Will the whole thing just go crashing down onto the ground? I don't think so. I feel like you do have to at least apply some effort, some force to it, more so than what the entire Switch to itself weighs. Oh, and as for the new Joy-Con grip, the dog face controller configuration, it's actually completely flat now. Remember this before sort of went around the Joy-Con because it would have to slide into it. Now it just is there as a support, but also I think just a more aggressive grip. So it seems like this should be more comfortable. Like this actually goes pretty far back, and there should just be a lot more there in terms of a handle to hold on to when it's all together. And, you know, looking at this, I still think that whatever their Pro controller ends up looking like is most likely going to be the way to play. But this does look a lot better than what we were dealing with when it comes to the default configuration out of the box. One, the Joy-Cons themselves are much larger So that's going to help right away. But two, just this sort of this grip here, it looks like it's just going to be made for people who have larger hands in general, whereas before we were dealing with tiny Joy-Cons, then even in the dog face grip, still kind of tiny. But that's going to do it here today for a closer look at the Switch 2 based on a couple of minutes at this point for footage and renderings that Nintendo themselves have released. But it's exciting stuff here for their system, as to me it looks like it's been just about upgraded across the board physically so far from what we've seen. So now hopefully they have a whole slew of titles and big time releases ready to go, which I guess we'll find out about in April. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.